everybody, to this week's employment prep class, where we're going to talk about the question that's asked at the end of every job interview. Do you have any questions for me? Now, I don't mean me. The interviewer is going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? We're going to talk about when you're asked this question, why you're asked this question, how to answer the question, and most importantly, how not to answer this question. Ready? Here we go. So, do you have any questions for me? Let me move myself down here. When are you asked this question? Usually always at the end of an interview, but sometimes during the interview. At the end of every interview, the person interviewing you will ask this question. It generally marks the end of the interview. It marks the end of the questions that they have prepared to ask you. So it's not necessarily the very end of the interview, because your questions could spark more conversation, which is a good thing. But it's the end of their presentation. It's the end of their list of questions that they want to ask you. They may ask you earlier in the interview if you have any questions, and that one you don't have to say yes to. You could say, no, I'm good. Let's, like that. But certainly at some point you do need to ask some questions. Definitely they will ask you again at the end if you have any questions. But sometimes earlier too. So just don't be freaked out if they ask you at the very beginning, do you have any questions for me? If you have more than one question prepared, yes, you can ask questions at the beginning and middle of the interview. Sometimes as you think of the questions, it's okay to ask questions. But always at the end. They'll always ask you at the end. Why do they ask you this question? They want to know that you're interested in the job and that you've been paying attention, that you have done enough research about the job to spark questions. Maybe the job description was very complete, but it didn't answer your questions about what shifts you work or whatever. We're going to talk about example questions in a minute, but when you have a question and you ask a question, it shows that you're interested in getting the job. You are interested, you have questions about the job because you're interested in the job. And it shows that you've been paying attention during the interview. So those things are both very important. And that's one of the reasons. Plus, they simply want to be helpful, right, and answer your questions. So it also, again, like I said, it marks the end of their part of them asking you questions. So that's why they ask that question. How should you answer this question? First of all, don't say that you do not have any questions. Do not ever say that you don't have any questions. Have some questions ready before you arrive to the interview. Read the website, read the job description, figure out what's missing out of all that information so that you can go into your interview with some questions written down in your little folder of questions that you might want to ask during the interview. Write down more than one question. Oh, can't see all that there. Have 5 questions ready, seriously, at least. If you think of more during the interview, try to write it down during the interview. You can take notes during the interview, write it down, or ask it immediately. But the more questions you have in the interview, it's a good thing because you're creating a conversation with the interviewer and getting to know them and developing a relationship with that interviewer that's going to make them more want to hire you if they like you and they think that you're really interested in the job. If the questions you ask that you have written down or not answered in the interview, you can ask as many of them as you want. I've never met an interviewer that was like, oh, that's too many questions. No, they like it when you ask questions as long as they're legit questions that have not already been answered during the interview. How not to answer this question. First of all, never, never, never say you don't have any questions. It's just no good. I can't. You cannot say that. It just shows that you're not interested in the job, that you weren't paying attention. Have some questions ready before you go in. Okay? Do not ask a question that has already been answered during the interview. If you talked during the interview about the dress code and then you ask about the dress code at the end of the interview, they're going to think that you were not paying attention at all. So that's not healthy. Be careful about asking about money or time off. Usually they will be upfront about the wages. If not, very carefully ask what the job pays. Sometimes it's even better to wait for the second interview before you ask that question. Entry-level work, it's okay to ask that question because it's usually minimum wage, but sometimes it's not. And sometimes in other kinds of interviews, they're generally let you know what the wages are before. It could be in the job description. If it is in the job description, then don't ask at the interview. If the information was already in the job description or already on their website, don't ask that in the interview because you should have found that out already. Be careful about asking for time off at this point. You don't want to seem like you have bad attendance. If you have a hard ticketed vacation coming up, like a cruise or airplane tickets to something, then it is a good time to mention that. Just say, hey, by the way, my sister's wedding is in Arizona next month, and I'm going to need this week off. Do you want to wait till I get back? Right? It's okay time to mention that if it's something hard ticketed. If it's not, if it's a flexible vacation, then you should wait till you've been there for 90 days before you even approach the subject. You should not take any time off. So don't be asking about time off in the interview. It just makes it seem like that's the most important thing to you, when the culture and the job and your daily tasks and the environment of the workplace should be what's most important to you right now during the interview. So again, do not ask questions that could be easily answered by reading the website or the job description. You should know the answers to those questions already, and hopefully you came into the interview with 4 or 5 more questions to ask during the interview, things that you legit want to know what it is. Stop right there. Do not ask a question that has already been answered during the interview. I cannot stress this enough. You get to the interview and you've already talked all about how your shifts are going to be 7:30 to 4:30, right? And you get to the end of the interview and you say, so what are my shifts? Were you not here? Pay attention during the interview. You must pay attention and listen carefully during the interview to know if your questions have been answered. You have to pay attention. You have to listen carefully. You can follow up on those questions. You can confirm and say, okay, I do have some questions, but I think you answered them. So let me just double check. The shifts are 7:30. The dress code is such and such. If they already told you the dress code, don't ask, but confirm. Or maybe you have a follow-up question. Does that dress code include jeans? Right? Ask a follow-up question. That's totally cool. But do not ask a question that's already been answered in the interview. If they tell you the job pays minimum wage, don't ask at the end of the interview how much the job pays. You have to pay attention during the interview and listen carefully. I cannot stress this enough. I put a big stop sign right here. Stop. Seriously. Do not ask a question that has already been answered during that interview. It's death, really. I've never had that happen where the person still got the job. Also, whenever someone has said no, they don't have any questions, they've never gotten the job. And that's just my experience of going to a lot of job interviews with people, that if they show genuine interest in the interview, way more likely that they're going to get called back. It's not a guarantee, but it's just been my experience that if they haven't paid attention and they've asked questions at the end of the interview that were already answered, they didn't get a call back. So coincidence? Maybe. All right. Do not ask a question that has already been answered in the interview. Got it? Okay. Here are some good examples. I'm going to make myself smaller here. Good examples of questions you can ask at the end of your interview if they have not already been answered during the interview, right? What is the dress code, right? Are there uniforms? Do I need to buy clothes? How many hours a week am I going to get? Again, sometimes this stuff is in the job description, and you should have read that already. The third one, what are typical shifts, or what would my shifts be? Again, only if it wasn't already discussed and wasn't in the job description. Okay. Here's a good one. And this one, number 4, number 5, these won't be on the website or on the job description. And that is, why is this position vacant? Or why did the last person leave this position? That is a question. Sometimes it makes the employer a little bit uncomfortable, depending on why the last person left this job. But it's a valuable question to know why. Did that person quit? Did they get fired? Why did they get fired? Did they get promoted? Because you want to know, number 6, is do they promote from within, or is this a job that's going to potentially lead to a promotion? What other jobs come after this job? When you get hired as a courtesy clerk in a grocery store, typically a promotion at that point would be a stalker, right? So where do you go from here? And that's number 6. Do you have training programs, management training programs? A lot of restaurants and retail have management training programs that are free to you and are valuable to you, whether you continue to work at that business or not. But management training and classes are very valuable. Do they have free online school? Things like that. Number 8, what would I be doing on a typical day? That's a great question. If you haven't already discussed it during the interview. A lot of times during interviews, the manager will sit there and talk to you about what you would be doing all day long. So at the end of the interview, you don't want to ask that question, what would I be doing all day? Because they already told you. But if they haven't already told you, or you're not clear, go over some of the job tasks that they've talked about and ask questions about those tasks, or how much of my day is going to be pushing carts? How much of my day is going to be janitorial work, right? That's okay to ask. Like, is it half and half? Number 9, what's the hardest part of this job? You want to be prepared. Or maybe the hardest part of this job is something that you really, really don't want to do, and maybe this isn't the right job for you. This is your opportunity to interview them by asking questions about the job to see whether or not you even want this job. Number 10, what are the future goals of the company? This should be on their website. If it's not a company that has a big website like that, then certainly it's okay to ask that. Number 11, what do your employees like about working here? Right? It's good if they know. It's kind of scary if they don't know, because these people in human resources should know about the culture and the environment of the company and what employees like the most. What's their favorite day? What's their favorite job? They should know, but they might not. Number 12, 13, and 14 are where you turn the tables and ask the interviewer some questions about their experience with the company. You can ask them, why did you choose to work for this company? How long have you worked here? What's your favorite thing about working for this company? And they'll all answer you nicely. Everyone likes talking about themselves, I think, and they will answer you. So far, every time we've asked that in the interview, the person has said, the people, I love the people here. Okay. That's good, because that means the people are friendly and nice to work with. So yeah, you could turn the tables and ask them some questions like that. Number 15, if you're very bold, you can ask them for feedback about your interview questions, your interview style, your interview skills. Do you have any recommendations for me about the way that I interview? I don't know if I would ask this, because if they're giving you advice about your interview skills, then they probably think you should keep looking and that you're going to have another interview in the future. Your best interview is your last interview, and it ends up being a company that you spend many, many years with. And so preparing for your next interview just kind of shows that you're planning on having more interviews. So that one's iffy. Also, if they automatically start giving you feedback about your interview skills, it's not a good sign. Like, next time you're in a job interview, won't be here, right? So I don't know if I would ask number 15. There you go. It is okay to ask if you will be hearing from them. When will I hear from you? When are you going to make a hiring decision? Can I contact you? Can I have your card? Those are all excellent questions, so that you have the tools to follow up with them. Getting their card is excellent because you can get an email address and send a thank you note and all that good stuff. So when do you expect to get a hiring decision? And when will I be hearing from you? Should I contact you? Those are all great questions. Number 15, not so much. Recap. Do you have any questions for me? All interviewers will ask you this question, sometimes in the middle, always at the end. Okay? Be prepared with questions before your interview. If they answer those questions during the interview, you can ask follow-up questions, but have questions prepared. Be interested enough in the job to show that you have questions about it because you're interested in it. It's okay to ask questions earlier in the interview, but save some for the end. Don't ask them all at the beginning, because then you'll be stuck at the end. And most importantly, do not ask a question that has already been answered. Please do not. Do not ask a question that has already been answered or is on the website or in the job description. Do your research. Get help with the research if you have to. That's fine. I help people with research all the time. Do not ask a question that's already been answered. I think that's the cardinal rule of this interview question. Do you have any questions for me? Yes, but you answered them all, right? And then follow up. You can tell the interviewer, you did a great job of answering all my questions. Do not say no. That's the thing. Just, no, I'm good. Can we go now? Right? They're not going to hire someone with that kind of attitude. So be enthusiastic and interested and show your interest in the job. Thank you so much for watching. I love my Slides Mania PowerPoint presentations. And here's a couple of websites. I checked. Indeed.com has great articles about asking questions at the end of an interview. Do you have any questions for me? Maybe? Wow. Seriously, if you have any questions for me about this lesson or any other, text me or contact me on Facebook. Again, thank you so much for watching, and like and subscribe to our videos.